have been indicted by an Oneida County grand jury charged with various crimes, the top count of which is murder in the second degree.
If you do not come back to court as required, then a warrant will be issued for your arrest. The bail you're posting by way of this bond will be forfeited and lost, and you'll then face a new felony charge, and that's known as bail jumping. And I do take particular note of the reality that if the defendant were convicted of the top count contained in this indictment, he faces a sentence of as much as 25 years to life in state prison. Correct, counsel?
Thomas Capezzi, Your Honor. On behalf of Michael.
Murderer! Murderer! Murderer!
Out, please.
Racist murderer! This is not justice! No bail!
It's not justice, Judge. It's not justice. I just want you to know that it's not right what happened. We hope they all go to hell.
Hey, what's up guys? Long Island Audit here, back again with another video. 6 New York State correctional officers that were members of a sanctioned beatdown squad were indicted by a grand jury on murder charges. I traveled to Oneida County in upstate New York so I could cover this injustice in person. I was able to record the entire proceedings from the jury box with the rest of the media. It's important to note that while local media is reporting on this injustice, it isn't getting much mainstream attention. And you'd think it would, seeing as it involves a brutal and vicious gang murder of a man who was handcuffed behind his back. Join me live tonight, February 23rd at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with my attorney and former Brooklyn prosecutor, Jacob Uriel, to get his legal perspective on the case. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Welcome to Oneida County Court. I know today's proceedings have garnered a lot of interest. You are all welcome to be here. This is a public courtroom. However, you can forfeit your right to be here by your conduct. This will be the only warning I'll give that no outbursts or disturbances of any kind will be tolerated. With that, we'll proceed. First case, please.
Nicholas Angelo.
Come right up to the podium, sir. This is the matter of the people against Nicholas Anzalone, indictment 25035 on for arraignment today. Defense counsel would please note your appearance for the record.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Andrew Safranco of Lamar Safranco Law.
Do I understand correctly, Mr. Safranco, you've been retained to represent Nicholas Anzalone?
Yes, Your Honor.
That is your name, sir, Nicholas Anzalone?
Yes.
How old are you, Mr. Anzalone?
44.
Mr. Anzalone, you're here today because the grand jury of Oneida County returned an indictment against you, and you have to be arraigned upon that. Counsel, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anzalone, in indictment 2025-35, you have been charged by an Oneida County grand jury with various crimes, the top count of which is murder in the second degree. And I'd ask Mr. Safranco if you waive further reading.
I do, Your Honor. Ask you to enter not guilty pleas on behalf of Mr. Anzalone.
Very good. A not guilty plea is then entered on the defendant's behalf. It would be my intention at this time, Mr. Safranco, to adjourn the matter to this point toward the end of March. I'd like to give you some time to review the discovery materials that I imagine have been or will be supplied to you shortly, and then have a pretrial conference to discuss scheduling of motions and things of that nature. March 31st, 9:30 a.m.
Judge, at this time I'm going to hand Mr. Safranco a copy of the indictment. One name is redacted from the indictment because that individual is not yet in custody. I am also handing him over standard pretrial notices. Judge, I've included an ID notice even though there were no formal identification procedures here. The ID notice is self-explanatory. It has to do with people who testified in front of the grand jury that viewed videotape of this assault, indicated that this person is such and such. I don't know that it will be the subject of the hearing or not, but I'll let Mr. Safranco take care of that. Do you acknowledge and see the list?
I do acknowledge it, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and with that, the undersigned want to be heard on the question of bail. Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Your Honor, due to the serious nature of the charges, our recommendation would be $50,000 cash or $250,000 bond or partially secured bond.
Oh, okay. Mr. Fitzpatrick, I'm having some difficulty hearing you. I'm going to ask you if you use the podium that has a microphone available to you. We'll get that over closer. Mr. Sifranco, did you want to be heard on that topic?
Yes, Your Honor. We were joined in that request by the district attorney. We prepared to meet the $250,000 bail bond. My client is a lifelong resident of this county, has voluntarily surrendered himself, as all of his family in this area known about these charges, could be possibly coming for over 2 months. Availed themselves, have been in constant contact with my office. He does not have a valid passport, but he has surrendered that not valid passport to my office. He has no intentions of fleeing the jurisdiction, and has all intentions of being in court every time he's directed by Your Honor. So we would ask you to set bail as requested by the district attorney.
All right, the court has considered the statutory factors, and I do take particular note of the reality that if the defendant were convicted of the top count contained in this indictment, he faces a sentence of as much as 25 years to life in state prison. Accordingly, bail is set in the following amounts. That is $100,000 cash, $250,000 insurance company bail bond, or $1 million partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. Do I understand correctly, Mr. Sifranco, you have a bondsman available?
I do, Your Honor. I have Mr. Bernardo here is available to post that bond at Your Honor's approval.
All right. Mr. Bernardo, if you have that paperwork complete, I will review the same. Bondsman J. Bernardo. Mr. Bernardo, you swear the truth of the content of your bail undertaking and affidavit, is that correct?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Anzalone, confirm for me you signed the bail undertaking here as well?
Yes.
All right. And Mr. Anzalone, I have before me now a proposed bail bond in the amount of $250,000, and I understand you're asking to be released upon this bond. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Do you understand what your number one obligation is under this bond?
Yes.
What is that?
Come court.
Exactly, return to court. Some things I want to make sure you understand. First, you do have a right to be present at all stages of proceedings in your case. But if for some reason you did not come back to court as required, then a warrant would be issued for your arrest. The bail that you're posting by way of this bond, that would be forfeited and lost. You would then face a new felony charge, and that's known as bail jumping. Your case could then proceed in your absence. That means you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. You understand?
Yes.
I have received now a document entitled Parker Warning, outlining the warnings that I just gave you in writing. You signed this document here as well after reviewing it with your attorney. Is that right?
Yes.
The court is signing and approving the bail bond. Transport number can have that.
Thank you.
Mr. Anzalone, you're due back in this court March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference with your attorney. I will see you back here then. Anything further from either side?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, we're all set then. Thank you, counsel.
I would like to remind all of you that this thug, Anthony Farina, resigned the moment the body camera footage was released to the public, so he can keep his taxpayer-funded pension, even if he's convicted of murder. Not only did we go follow up at the correctional facility, we went to Farina's residence to ask him how he felt about being free for 2 months when the world watched him brutally murder a man who was handcuffed behind his back. If you haven't seen those videos, I'll leave links in the description below.
This is the matter of the people against Anthony Farina, indictment 25035, on for arraignment today. I've received correspondence from a James Riotto that he's been retained in this matter. Are you-
Yes, Judge, I'm here of counsel.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Sweatshirts. All right, and that's your name, sir, Anthony Farina?
Yes.
How old are you, Mr. Farina?
49.
Mr. Farina, you are here today because the grand jury of Oneida County returned an indictment against you, so you have to be arraigned upon that. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Farina, in indictment 2025-35, you have been indicted by an Oneida County grand jury charged with various crimes, the top count of which is murder in the second degree. The counsel, I'd ask if you waive a formal reading of the indictment.
Waiver reading and enter plea not guilty to all charges.
Not guilty pleas entered on the defendant's behalf.
This time, Judge, I'm going to hand counsel a copy of the indictment, again with the admonition that one name has been redacted because that individual is not in custody. I'm also providing our standard pretrial notices along with a disc concerning certain statements made by Mr. Farina, and ask if he acknowledged receipt.
Acknowledge receipt, Your Honor.
All right. What I'm going to do, Mr. Starzewski, is adjourn the matter to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference. Give you some time to review the discovery materials. At that time, I can set up a motion schedule for you as well. Will that be you or Mr. Riotto at that time?
Probably Mr. Riotto.
Very good. All right. And with respect to the topic of bail, Mr. Fitzpatrick?
I would ask, Your Honor, bail consistent with what you said on Mr. Anselmo.
Mr. Starzewski, your thoughts?
Jordan.
All right, the court's considered the statutory factors and taking particular note of the fact that the defendant, if convicted of the top count, could face a sentence of as much as 25 years to life in state prison. Bail is set in the following amounts. That is $100,000 cash, $250,000 insurance company bail bond, or $1 million partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. Officer, can you please pass this over? Mr. Starzewski, I'm going to have you provided with a Parker warning to review with your client.
Thank you.
Mr. Farina, you have a right to be present at all stages of the proceedings in your case, but for some reason, you posted bail and did not come back to court as required. A warrant will be issued for your arrest. The posted bail will be forfeited and lost. You may then face a new felony charge known as bail jumping, and the case may proceed in your absence, meaning you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. Do you understand that?
Yes.
I've received this document entitled Parker Warning, which outlines in writing the warnings that I just gave you. Confirm for me you sign this document after reviewing it here with your attorney today. Thank you. All right, bail is set. The amount so indicated. The defendant is to return to court on March 31st at 9:30 a.m. Is there anything further from either side?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Yes, Your Honor, I'd ask that defendant surrender his passport to counsel, and counsel advise me of when it has been surrendered. Suggest a week to do that.
We'll make that happen.
Very good. If you please notify the court when that's complete.
I will.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's all set. He's committed. The matter of the people against Matthew Gallagher, indicted 25035, on for arraignment today. I understand, Mr. Lewerbrand, you've been retained to represent Matthew Gallagher, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
That's your name, sir, Matthew Gallagher?
Yes,
How old are you, Mr. Gallagher?
43.
Mr. Gallagher, you're here today because the grand jury of Oneida County has returned an indictment against you. You must be arraigned upon that indictment. Counsel, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gallagher, in indictment 2025-35, an Oneida County grand jury has charged you with various crimes, the top count of which is murder in the second degree. And I'd ask counsel if you waive a further reading of the indictment.
Yes, we do, Your Honor. We have a plea of not guilty and waive reading of the indictment.
A not guilty plea is entered on the defendant's behalf.
At this time, Judge, I'm going to hand counsel a copy of the indictment with one name redacted, along with our standard pretrial notices, including a disc containing statements allegedly made by Mr. Gallagher, and ask if you acknowledge receipt of those.
Thank you, Your Honor. I received the documents and I acknowledge receipt.
All right, in that case, it's the court's intention to adjourn the matter to the morning of March 31st, 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference. I'll give you time between now and then to review the discovery materials and set a motion schedule at that next appearance. With respect to bail, what's the position of the people?
Your Honor, we recommend bail consistent with what you said on Mr. Anzalone and Mr. Farina.
Mr. Lewerbrand, your thoughts?
We would join in that request, Your Honor. I would add that Mr. Gallagher is a lifetime resident of the area. He has family local, 2 young children and a wife. He's worked throughout the area. There's no criminal record whatsoever, Your Honor.
All right, the court's considered the arguments of counsel and the statutory factors, and noting that the defendant could face a sentence of as much as 25 years to life in state prison If convicted after a trial in this matter, bail is set in the following amounts: $100,000 cash, $250,000 insurance company bail bond, or $1 million partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. Mr. Gallagher, in a position to post that bond today, or did you need to schedule that?
He's prepared. Mr. Bernardo has agreed to provide the bond for us on behalf of Mr. Gallagher.
I'll pass a part of warning over. You can review that with your client while I look over the bond paperwork, please. Before me now is bondsman J. Bernardo. Mr. Bernardo, you swear the truth, the content of your bail affidavit and undertaking?
I do, Your Honor.
Mr. Gallagher sign the same. So, Mr. Gallagher, I have before me now a proposed bail bond in the amount of $250,000. I understand you're asking to be released upon this, is that right?
Yes.
You understand what your number one obligation is under this bond? Exactly right. You do have a right to be present at all stages of proceedings in your case. If you do not come back to court as required, then a warrant will be issued for your arrest. The bail you're posting by way of this bond will be forfeited and lost, and you'll then face a new felony charge, and that's known as bail jumping. Your case may then proceed in your absence. That means you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. Do you understand that?
I do.
The warnings I just gave you were just provided to you in written form by way of this document entitled Parker Warning. I'm holding the same up for you. Confirm for me that you didn't sign this document here after you reviewed it with your attorney. Court is signing and approving the bail bond. You're released on the bond today. You're due back in this court on March 31st at 9:30 a.m. We're all set. Thank you. So to begin, Ms. Parkwell, you have a number of requests from news media for audio and video coverage of today's proceedings, as well as still photography. Do you have any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Court will permit the same. Sir, your name is Christopher Walrath?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Walrath, you're charged under Indictment 25035 with the felony offenses of murder in the second degree as well as manslaughter in the first degree. On these charges, you're entitled to the assistance of counsel at this and all stages of proceedings. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided to you at no cost to you. Ms. Hartwell here is with the Public Defender's Office. If you qualify for her services and you like, I can sign her to represent you. Is that your wish?
Yes.
Is he at least preliminarily qualified, Ms. Hartwell?
Yes, Your Honor, he does.
All right, then at this time, Ms. Hartwell and her office will be assigned to represent you. I'll just note, Mr. Walrath, that is subject to your it being verified that you are financially eligible for assignment of the Public Defender's Office, and that we do not have a conflict of counsel develop as the case moves forward. I just want to make sure you understand that. With that, you're here today to be arraigned on Indictment 25035. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Waller, in indictment 2025-35, you've been charged by an Oneida County grand jury with various crimes, the top count of which is murder in the second degree. Counsel, I ask if you waive a formal reading of the indictment.
I will. Yes, thank you.
This time, Your Honor, I'm going to hand counsel a copy of the indictment with one name redacted because that person is not yet in custody, along with our standard pretrial notices, and ask if you acknowledge receipt of that.
I do acknowledge receipt, Your Honor.
And enter a plea.
Yes, Your Honor, we enter a plea of not guilty.
A not guilty plea is entered on the defendant's behalf. I'm going to adjourn the case to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference and to set a motion schedule. With respect to the topic of bail, what's the position of the people?
We would ask for bail to be set consistent with that of Mr. Anzalone, Mr. Farina, and Mr. Gallagher, Your Honor.
Ms. Hartwell, your thoughts?
Your Honor, with regard to that, I'm just only asking the court to consider the reasonable bail based on the information that the court has received, as well as the fact that my client is a lifelong resident here in the area of New York State, and I do not believe is a flight risk.
Officer, would you mind passing this over to Ms. Hartwell, please? The court has considered the arguments of counsel as well as the statutory factors, taking particular note of the reality that if the defendant were convicted of the top count contained in the indictment, he could face as much as 25 years to life in state prison. Bail is set in the following amounts. That is $100,000 cash, $250,000 insurance company bail bond, or $1 million partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. Now, Mr. Walrath, if you do make bail and you're released while these charges are pending, you do have the right to be present at all stages of proceedings in your case. If you do not come back to court when required, then a warrant will be issued for your arrest. The bail posted would be forfeited and lost. You would then face a new felony charge, that's known as bail jumping. And the case may proceed in your absence, meaning you can be tried in your absence and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. Do you understand?
Yes.
There's a document in writing to that effect of the warnings I just gave you. Please take a moment to review the same with your attorney, and then you may sign. For the record, the defendant has executed the original of the court's written Parker warning. The matter is adjourned now to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Judge, I would ask the court ordered the defendant to surrender his passport to counsel and that she advise the court and special prosecutor when that's done.
Your Honor, I didn't have a passport.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Olson.
Michael Fisher.
Matter of appeal against Michael Fisher under indictment 25035 on for arraignment today. That's your name, sir, Michael Fisher?
Yes, sir.
How old are you, Mr. Fisher?
54.
Mr. Fisher, you're here today because the grand jury of Long Island County returned an indictment against you. You are charged with one count of the felony offense of manslaughter in the second degree. On this charge, you're entitled to the assistance of counsel at this and all stages of proceedings. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided to you at no cost to you. Ms. Hartwell here is with the Public Defender's Office. If you qualify and you like, I can assign her to represent you. Is that your wish?
Yes, please.
He qualifies.
He does, Your Honor, preliminary qualifies for public defender services.
All right. So, Mr. Fisher, I'm assigning Ms. Hartwell today so you understand. Conditionally, that is that you're going to ultimately, after they get a further review of your finances, properly qualify for assignment of counsel, and then I'm going to have to look into whether or not a conflict exists and they need to assign you counsel. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. You can stand in for arraignment today.
Yes.
Very good. We will proceed with the arraignment. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Fisher, in indictment 2025-35, you have been charged by an Oneida County grand jury with a single crime of manslaughter in the second degree. And counsel, I'd ask if you waive a formal reading of the indictment.
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to hand counsel a copy of the redacted indictment, redacted only with one name being removed, along with our standard pretrial notices, along with a disc containing statements allegedly made by Mr. Fisher, and I'd ask if you acknowledge receipt of those items.
I am in receipt, Your Honor.
And under a plea.
Not guilty, please.
A not guilty plea is entered on the defendant's behalf. This matter will be adjourned to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference and setting a motion schedule. Mr. Fitzpatrick, did you want to be heard on the topic of bail?
Yes, Your Honor. I would ask on behalf of the people, bail be set in the amount of $25,000 cash or $100,000 bond. And I'd also ask, as with previous arraigned defendants, that Mr. Fisher surrender his passport to counsel and she advised the court and the special prosecutor of same.
Is there a passport to surrender?
Do you have a passport? No, he does not, Your Honor.
Ms. Hartwell, your thoughts on bail?
Your Honor, with regard to bail, again, I would ask the court to consider reasonable bail in this matter. I do see that Mr. Fisher is not charged with 2 counts, but only 1 count. And he is a lifelong resident of the state of New York, and he is not a flight risk. As I just indicated, he does not have a passport, and I can assure that he will not be a flight risk, and I ask the court to consider bail slightly lower than what's been recommended.
The court's considered the arguments of counsel in noting that the defendant could be sentenced to as much as 5 to 15 years in state prison if convicted after a trial. Bail is set in the following amounts, that is $50,000 cash, $100,000 insurance company bail bond, or $500,000 partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. Do I understand correctly, Mr. Bernardo is in a position to post a bond today?
Yes, you are.
All right, I'm going to have your paperwork ready. I'll review the same. Performing now bonds for J. Bernardo. Mr. Bernardo, you swear the truth of the content of your bail affidavit and undertaking. Is that correct? I do. Mr. Fisher, I have before me proposed bail bond in the amount of $100,000, and I understand you're asking to be released upon this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you understand what your obligation is under this bond?
Yes.
What's that?
Show up or lose everything.
Exactly right. Yeah. You have to come to court or this bond will be forfeited.
Won't be a problem.
Very good. So I'm going to advise you of your warnings relative to that. You do have a right to be present at all stages of proceedings in your case. If you do not come back to court when required, then a warrant will be issued for your arrest. The bail being posted by way of this bond here today, that would be forfeited and lost. You'd then face a new felony charge known as bail jumping, and the case could proceed in your absence, meaning you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
I've received a document entitled Parker Warning that outlines those warnings I just gave you in written form. Confirm for me you signed this document here after reviewing it with counsel today?
Yes.
Court is signing and approving the bail bond. You'll be released on the bond here today. Mr. Fisher, you are due back in this court on March 31st at 9:30 a.m.
I'll check on the progress of the others.
This is the matter of the people against Nicholas Gentile, indictment 25035, on for arraignment today. And counsel, it's Julie Nociolo, correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
You've been retained to represent Nicholas Gentile?
I have.
That's your name, sir, Nicholas Gentile?
Yes, sir.
How old are you, Mr. Gentile?
36 years old.
Mr. Gentile, you're here today because the grand jury of Oneida County returned an indictment against you. You have to be arraigned upon that. Counsel, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gentile, an indictment 2025-35. An Oneida County grand jury has charged you in the 8th count of said indictment with tampering with physical evidence, violation of section 215.40, subdivision 2 of the penal law. And Ms. Nociolo, I ask if you waive a further reading of the indictment.
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to hand counsel a copy of the indictment redacted with one name missing, along with our pretrial notices and demands, et cetera. I ask if you acknowledge receipt of those items.
I acknowledge receipt, Your Honor.
And enter a plea.
And for plea of not guilty on my client's behalf.
A not guilty plea is entered on the defendant's behalf. The court will adjourn the matter to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference and the setting of a motion schedule. What are the people's thoughts with respect to the defendant's release status?
I believe this is a case where you can't set bail, so I leave any conditions to the court's discretion.
Do you want to be heard on that topic, Ms. Nociolo?
Just briefly, Your Honor, with respect to any conditions, I mean, I agree obviously with the people. This is a non-qualifying offense. Mr. Gentile has been a lifelong member of this community, has a wife and 2 kids, has retained me as counsel, and we ask therefore that he be released on his own recognizance.
All right, the court's considered the arguments of counsel and the bail statute being what it is at present. This does constitute a non-qualifying offense such that bail may not be set on this particular charge. Mr. Gentile, that means I'm going to be releasing you on your own recognizance, which effectively means on your promise that you will return to court when required. Do you promise me you'll do so?
Yes, Your Honor.
Understand that if you were to break that promise and not come back to court as directed, then you're subject to having release on your own recognizance revoked, and that means you could then be committed to the jail with or without bail, so I'll be assured you do come to court when required. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm going to pass over a document entitled Parker Warning that outlines your obligations in that regard. For the record, the defendant has executed the written Parker Warning here in court. Mr. Gentile, keep in touch with your attorney. You'll be back in this court on March 31st at 9:30 a.m. Thank you, Your Honor. Kingsley, the reason for your appearance here today is because the grand jury of Oneida County returned an indictment against you, so you have to be arraigned upon that. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I apologize to the court, but I'd like to amend the indictment to reflect the correct spelling of Mr. Kingsley's name. In the head note of the indictment and in count 1 and count 2, Mr. Kingsley's name should be spelled K-I-N-G-S-L-E-Y.
I see that a couple of letters were transposed. No objection, Mr. Finelli?
No objection, Your Honor.
The court will permit the amendment.
Mr. Kingsley, in indictment 2025-35, you've been charged by an Oneida County grand jury with various crimes, the top count of which is murder in the second degree. And I'd ask Mr. Finelli if you waive a formal reading of the indictment.
I do waive.
This time, Your Honor, I'm going to hand Mr. Finelli a copy of the redacted indictment with one name missing, along with our standard pretrial notices, as well as a disc containing statements allegedly made by Mr. Kingsley, and I ask you to acknowledge receipt of those items.
I acknowledge receipt.
And or plea.
My client wishes to enter a plea of not guilty.
Not guilty plea is entered on the defendant's behalf. This matter will be adjourned to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference and setting up a motion schedule. And did either side wish to be heard on the question of bail? Mr. Fitzpatrick.
I ask that bail be set consistent with Mr. Ancelone, Mr. Farina, Mr. Walworth, and Mr. Gallagher, and that Mr. Kingsley surrender his passport, if he has one, to Mr. Finelli at his earliest convenience, and notify the court and special prosecutor when that is done.
Mr. Finelli, does your client have a passport?
Your Honor, I believe he does have a passport, correct? I do not. Oh, do not have a passport. Does not have a passport.
All right, and your thoughts on bail, Mr. Finelli?
Your Honor, I just ask that you take into consideration, it's my understanding that my client is a family man. He is a lifelong resident of Jefferson County. And I would ask that the court take those considerations when setting bail.
Courts considered the statutory factors as well as the positions of counsel here this morning, and I do take particular note of the fact that if convicted after a trial with the top count here, the defendant does face as much as 25 years to life in state prison. Accordingly, bail is set in the following amounts, that is $100,000 cash, $250,000 insurance company bail bond, or $1 million partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. We'll pass over a written Parker warning. Mr. Kingsley, some things to understand, sir. You do have a right to be present at all stages of proceedings in your case, but if you did not come back to court when required after posting bail, then a warrant would be issued for your arrest, and bail posted would be forfeited and lost. You then face a new felony charge known as bail jumping, and your case could proceed in your absence, meaning you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. You understand?
Yes.
Counsel, please take a moment to review that with your client and have him execute the same. For the record, the defendant has executed the written Parker warning here in court. The matter is now adjourned to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. I will have you back down, Mr. Kingsley. He's all set. Thank you. This is the matter of the people against David Walters, indictment 25035, on for arraignment today. Mr. Pasalacqua, do I understand correctly you've been retained to represent David Walters?
Yes, Your Honor, on behalf of Pasalacqua Associates, we would have been retained to represent Mr. Walters.
Thank you. That's your name, sir, David Walters?
That's correct, sir.
How old are you, Mr. Walters?
36.
Mr. Walters, you're here today because the grand jury of Oneida County returned an indictment against you. You have to be arraigned upon it. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walters, in indictment 2025-35, an Oneida County grand jury has charged you in a 6-count of said indictment with the crime of manslaughter in the second degree. Mr. Pasalacqua, I'd ask if you waive a formal reading of said.
I would.
I'm going to hand defense counsel a copy of that redacted indictment along with our standard pretrial notices as well as a disc containing statements allegedly made by Mr. Walters to law enforcement.
I would acknowledge receipt, Your Honor. Waive formal proceedings, enter into plea of not guilty to those charges at this time.
Very good. A not guilty plea is then entered on the defendant's behalf. The matter will be adjourned for a pretrial conference to March 31st at 9:30 a.m., at which time, if necessary, I will also set a motion schedule. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, your thoughts on bail?
I would ask that bail be set consistent with that set on Mr. Fisher, and that if Mr. Walters has a passport, he surrender it to his attorney, and his attorney notify the court and the special prosecutor of same.
Pessalacqua, does your client have a passport?
He does not, Your Honor.
All right, and your thoughts then on bail?
Yes, Your Honor, I would ask the court to consider setting bail lower than has been previously set. Mr. Walters has been a lifelong resident of the area, does not have a passport, does not recall the last time if he ever left the country at all. He's retained my office. He's been in constant contact with us. We've maintained constant contact with Mr. Fitzpatrick's office throughout these proceedings and leading up to today's arraignment. He poses zero flight risk, and I would ask the court to consider those factors when setting bail.
Thank you. The court's considered the statutory factors as well as the position of counsel here this afternoon, noting that if convicted of the sole count the defendant faces under this indictment, he could face 5 to 15 years in a state prison facility. Bail is set in the following amounts. That is $50,000 cash, $100,000 insurance company bail bond, or $500,000 partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. Mr. Walters, if you post bail while these charges are pending, you do have a right to be present at all stages of proceedings in your case. But if you did not come back to court, then a warrant would be issued for your arrest. Any bail posted would be forfeited and lost, and you would then face a new felony charge known as bail jumping. And your case could proceed in your absence, meaning you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. Do you understand?
Yes.
There's a written document to that effect. I'll let you take a moment to review that with your attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor.
For the record, the defendant has executed the original Parker warning here in court. The court is now in receipt of the same. The matter is adjourned to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference, and I will have you back then, Mr. Walters.
Thank you.
Thank you. A number of requests from the news media to cover today's proceedings and objection. The court will permit the same. This is the matter of the people against Michael Mashaw, indictment 25035, on for arraignment today. And it is Thomas Capezza, correct, counsel?
Thomas Capezza, Your Honor. On behalf of Michael.
Murderer! Murderer! Murderer!
Out, please. You've been retained to represent Michael Mashaw.
Yes, Your Honor.
And sir, that's your name, Michael Mashaw?
Yes, sir.
How old are you, Mr. Mashaw?
47, sir.
Mr. Mashaw, you're here today because the grand jury went on account.
Racist murderer! This is not justice! Give him bail! No bail! Justice! We want justice!
You're here today, Mr. Mashaw, because the grand jury of Oneida County returned an indictment against you. You have to be arraigned upon that. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you may arraign.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Mashaw, in indictment 2025-35, you've been charged by the Oneida County grand jury in count 4 with the crime of manslaughter in the second degree. Mr. Capezza, I ask if you waive a formal reading of said indictment.
Waive a public reading and to please of not guilty.
At this time, Your Honor, I'm going to hand Mr. Capezza a redacted copy of that indictment missing one name, along with our standard pretrial notices, along with a disc containing statements allegedly made by Mr. Mashaw, and ask if you acknowledge receipt of those.
Acknowledge receipt. Excuse me, Your Honor?
You entered a plea, did I hear you right?
Yes.
All right, a plea of not guilty entered on the defendant's behalf. This matter will be adjourned to March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference and a setting of a motion schedule. Mr. Fitzpatrick, your thoughts on bail, sir?
Your Honor, I would ask that bail be set consistent with that set on Mr. Fisher and Mr. Walters, and that Mr. Mashaw, if he has a passport, surrender same to Mr. Capezza, and that Mr. Capezza notify the court and special prosecutor when that is done.
Your Honor, we will turn over the passport.
Okay, very good, thank you. That'll be a condition of any bail set here today. Your thoughts on bail, Mr. Capezza?
Your Honor, we consent to the bail and Mr. Bernardo will provide it.
All right, the court's considered the arguments of counsel here this morning, as well as the statutory factors, and bail is then set in the following amounts: $50,000 cash, $100,000 insurance company bail bond, or $500,000 partially secured surety bond with a minimum 10% deposit. You have the bond paperwork? I'll take a look at that, Mr. Bernardo. Mr. Mashaw, I have before me a proposed bail bond in the amount of $100,000. I understand you're asking to be released upon this, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you understand what your number one obligation is under this bond?
Yes.
What's that?
Be here on the 31st.
And on any other date you're required to be in court. You have a right to be present at all stages of proceedings in this case, but if you did not come back to court when required, then a warrant would be issued for your arrest. Any bail you posted, even by way of this bond, that would be forfeited and lost. And you would then face a new felony charge known as bail jumping, and the case could proceed in your absence, meaning you could be tried in your absence, and if convicted, sentenced in your absence as well. Do you understand that? I've received a written document to that effect entitled Parker Warning. Confirm for me you signed that document here in court after you reviewed it with your attorney.
Yes, sir.
All right, you'll be released on that bond today. You're due back in this court on March 31st at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial conference.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That is all. Thank you.
It's not justice, Judge. It's not justice. You people killed the black man and got out the back door. This is definitely not justice. This is not justice for the black community. I just want you to know that it's not right what happened. We hope they all go to hell. Place in hell for them. Place in hell for them, very much so. This ain't justice. I don't care nothing about black people out there. This ain't justice.
Let me table this a bit.
Yeah, they're investigating.
Justice for! Justice for! Justice for! Justice for! Justice for!